proper use in the present.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلة ولا شفاعة.
According to the glorious Qur'an, one of the best ways to use your money is to spend it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by spreading His message of Islam. Peace TV is a non-profit Islamic satellite television channel that is primarily dedicated for just that cause, the proper presentation of Islam. It's a great choice to invest in it and a golden opportunity to purify your wealth in a way that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Support Peace TV. Send your zakat and donations to IRFI Al Ryan Bank, 47 Calthorpe Road, Birmingham, UK, B151TH. Pound account number 011-32301. IBAN GB49ARAY 30008301 132301. Sort code 300083. Swift BIC code ARAY GB22. Please confirm your contribution at support@peacetv.tv.
Support Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
اقرأ أخيا ورتل القرآن اصدح بصوتك اسمع الأكوان اقرأ كلام الله داوي نفوسنا لنحس في أعماقنا الإيمان كالحجارة قسوة فإن القرآن حين
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome back to our second episode in a series on reflections on the Qur'an. We're talking about the importance of the Qur'an in Islamic civilization and the tremendous effort that the Muslims made to preserving the book, to conveying it to the generations after them, to understanding it. In fact, it's just an amazing human achievement given the total lack of technological means for preservation of a text at that time, that it has been preserved for us word for word down to the time that we're living in. That really hasn't happened for any other text from that period of time. Now, in the previous episode, we were talking about the importance of the Qur'an with regard to the Arabic language. It's an important entry portal for non-Arabic speaking Muslims to learn the Arabic language. In fact, I remember there was a professor at a branch of Imam Muhammad Saud University. I used to work there as a translator in suburban Washington. And one of the teachers of Arabic to non-Arabic speakers, he had lengthy experience teaching Arabic to non-Arabs, and he had developed a methodology of using the Qur'an to teach people the Arabic language, which involved memorizing a portion and then learning the meaning of each word in that passage, and then being introduced to some basic grammatical issues about the way the sentence was put together. And he had thought about this in some really systematic way, and so he was able to provide a means that facilitated non-Arabs learning Arabic. Now, the flip side of that is that it's really important to understand Arabic in order to properly understand the Qur'an. And the importance of that was not lost on early generation of Muslims. If you look at the Sahaba, of course, they understood the language as any native speaker understands his language. And despite that, even the children of the Sahaba were starting to lose that instinctive, intrinsic way of speaking the language. Now, that's a feature of every language. Languages change over time. What happened among the children of the Sahaba was that these Sahaba had conquered all these lands around them, and one of the effects of that process was that there were prisoners of war who were taken as slaves, and some of those slaves bore children to their Muslim owners. And some of them were concubines and some of them were wives. And it's mentioned, there's an incident in Sahih Muslim where Aisha is sitting with her nephew and I think her grandnephew, I forget exactly, but they were both related to her through her brothers or sisters. And one of them had an Arabic father and an Arabic mother, and one of them had an Arabic father and a Persian mother. And so at some point during this conversation, they were about to eat, they sat down. Now these are her mahrams, and so she's eating with them. So they're getting ready to eat, and there's a conversation that's been going on, and Aisha, she comments on this half-Persian relative, she comments on his Arabic, and she says, "Why can't you speak more like him?" And the man that she was speaking to, he wasn't happy with what she said. I mean, he got insulted. And he said, I don't feel like eating. Somehow he was going to refuse to eat with them. And then that got Aisha a bit upset, and she insisted that he sit down and eat with them. But the point of mentioning that whole incident is that even among the children of the Sahaba, the way that they spoke Arabic was starting to change. So the scholars who gave the greatest effort to dealing with this issue were the scholars of Kufa and Basra. Now, they understood, Allah had declared in Surah Al-Hijr that in the translations, it is we who have sent down the Qur'an and it is we who will preserve it. They understood that, yes, Allah is undertaking the preservation of this book, but He is using people to do it. And that's why people memorize the Qur'an, that's why the Prophet ﷺ had it written down. And the preservation of the Qur'an is not simply preserving its meanings. So as I mentioned in the previous episode, those children who were memorizing Qur'an with me when I was in a madrasa in Karachi, they didn't understand Arabic. So for them to memorize the Qur'an and not know really the meaning of what it is that they'd memorized, that's falling far short of what is expected. So in order for the Qur'an to be fully preserved, then the language in which it was revealed also must be fully preserved. And so what happened that scholars from these cities in the very early years of the Islamic era, they would go out into the desert and they would visit these Bedouin tribes. Now the Bedouin tribes were considered to be the repositories of the pristine Arabic. And the only kind of art form that was present in the Arabian Peninsula at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was their language, poetry. If you live in a desert and you're moving around, you can't be making like paintings. You have to strap them on your camel as you move from place to place. There just weren't the technological means for various kinds of art forms that other civilizations developed. So whatever creativity the Arabs exercised in that area of human expression was in their poetry. So these Bedouin tribes, it was a matter of prestige to have a poet in your tribe, because there were no newspapers, there was no TV, and the way that news got around was that if somebody composed a really striking piece of poetry and it would be recited, and then, you know, when people are traveling and you're sitting around a campfire, what do you do after you've eaten? Well, you talk, and then one of the things that people would do is recite poetry. So if you had a really capable poet, his commentary on what was going on, the events that were happening between him and other people, his tribe and other tribes, if he was a really capable poet, then he could make his tribe's prestige go up, and frequently they would make fun of people that they were at some kind of a conflict with. So if you had a poet who could do that, make the other guys look bad, that was a lot of what their social discourse was about. So these Bedouin tribes had all this poetry that they had memorized. And these scholars from Kufa and Basra would go to these tribes and they would learn their poems from them and then take them back to Kufa and Basra and record them. And around about 130 years after the Hijrah, that's when paper started to become available. And that's when you see this explosion of the writing down of Islamic knowledge. So one of the areas that a whole lot of writing got done about was the Arabic language, Arabic poetry, and then from the poetry, you had this process where they would survey the poetry to extract the rules of grammar and the rules of other aspects of the language from the way the pre-Islamic Arabs were using the language at a time when the influence of outside languages was minimal, and particularly the influence of people who spoke Arabic but spoke it in a non-pristine form. So this effort preserved the language. I'm going to take a break and come back,
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Abdurrahim McCarthy, and I would like to wish all of the viewers of Peace TV a blessed Ramadan. May Allah make us from the successful in our fasting and in our prayers.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Abdul Bari Yahya wishing all the viewers of Peace TV a blessed Ramadan, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all our deeds, our prayers and fasting, and also our zakat.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس.
Yasir Fazagha.
That you were the best of nations erected for the goodness of other people.
Uplift your faith. Expand your horizon.
Allah is warning the Muslims. You straighten your lines and you stand shoulder to shoulder and no gaps between you and your brother.
Salim Al-Amri.
Otherwise, Allah will turn your hearts against one another.
With clear guidance.
Allah said He would try us and test us with fear, hunger.
Dr. Bilal Phillips.
But give glad tidings to those who are patient.
Mold your character on the path of the Qur'an and Sunnah in Faith Horizons. Every Monday to Saturday at 5:30 p.m. UK and 6:30 p.m. Europe on Peace TV.
For understanding Qur'an, we have to know how many words are there. If we want to understand the Qur'an, we have to understand 78,000 words. In each line of the Qur'an, 9 words are there. 125 frequently occurring words that come in the Qur'an 40,000 times. Every 10th word of the Qur'an is from Surah Al-Fatiha.
Soothing compilation.
When we open the Qur'an, immediately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts talking to us.
Direct communication.
Our relationship with the Qur'an is direct, personal, planned and relevant. You're saying it, you're showing it, you're thinking about it, you're listening, you're watching the words, and that's the way to go.
Let's comprehend the pure words that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Let's Understand the Quran. Every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 5 p.m. UK and 6 p.m. Europe on Peace TV. Islamic International School presents The Stars of Future, The Dais of Future.
Today, I'll be talking about Da'watul Islam, an invitation toward Islam.
Watch Faisal Kokani, Ismail Khan, Zayed Sheikh, Subaiba Supariwala, Amreen Sheikh, Zainab Faruqi, Fatima Munshi and Farid Naik.
I welcome all of you with the Islamic greetings. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Welcome to the world of future generation. Every Saturday at 9 p.m. UK and 10 p.m. Europe on Peace TV. This Ramadan,
Welcome, O Ramadan.
Ramadan, the month of blessings. Suhr, Iftar, Taraweeh, Laylatul Qadr, Aitikaf, Eidul Fitr, and many other practices that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did in this month of fasting. I'll be there for you throughout this glorious month of Ramadan. Let's make it more fruitful and reward-worthy. Share a date with me every day throughout this month of Ramadan.
watch 1-hour exclusive episodes. Ramadan, a date with Dr. Zakir. Every day at 8 p.m. UK and 9 p.m. Europe on Peace TV.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back. We're discussing the role of the Qur'an in Islamic civilization and the tremendous collective effort of Muslim scholars from the early generations in order to preserve the Arabic language by which the Qur'an can be understood. I mean, it's a necessity for the understanding of the Qur'an to be able to understand the language in which it is encoded. And the result of this effort is that your average Arab who goes to a government school anywhere in the Muslim lands, they will learn, in addition to their colloquial form of Arabic, what's called modern standard Arabic. And this is a form of Arabic that gives the person who speaks it the basic grammatical tools in order to be able to understand the Qur'an. It's definitely not enough by itself, but what it means is that someone who's educated and knows modern standard Arabic, when they read the Qur'an, they can understand linguistically a very significant part of it. And that's a real difference between Arabic and most other languages. The earliest piece of writing, of literature in the English language, something that is called English, Old English, is the poem Beowulf, which is about this guy who kills a monster, and it got turned into a movie some years ago. But the original poem, Beowulf, any English speaker who sat down today and tried to read that poem, they wouldn't be able to make it even a page and understand what is going on here. The words are too different. It's a completely different vocabulary. Yeah, that language that those people were speaking has some historical relationship with the language that English speakers speak today, but modern speakers can't understand it. And that was, I think, roughly, about 1,000 years ago. I'm not sure when exactly Beowulf was composed. But the Qur'an is older than Beowulf, and your average educated Arab can understand a great deal of the Qur'an. There are some words in the Qur'an which are no longer part of the way people speak, and so even an educated Arab would have to look up some of those words. But it's not enough of that to disrupt the ability to get a basic understanding of what the text is saying if you know Arabic. So that's a really important thing about the relationship between the Qur'an and the language. People preserve the language, and the Qur'an itself has had this stabilizing effect on the language. Now, in colloquial Arabic, the various forms of Arabic that are spoken, like in Algeria, if somebody from Sudan, I remember I had a friend, I worked with a friend from Sudan, he said that he had a roommate from Algeria and his friends were visiting him, and when they spoke in their local slang, he couldn't understand them. Similarly, I had a neighbor when I was in the UAE who was a Palestinian, and he taught Arabic language in a high school. And I asked him a question about a grammatical issue in slang, and he was very dismissive of it. I said, what they speak locally here is not Arabic. And he confided in me that he'd been teaching in that town I was living at the time for 10 or 15 years or something. He said when his students talked to each other in the class, like during a break or something, he couldn't understand them. It took him 2 years to be able to really understand what the local people were saying to each other. So there are different forms of local Arabic which differ radically from one part of the Arab world to another, but there is this modern standard Arabic that they all understand and that gives them access to the Qur'an as well. So those are some preliminary issues regarding the importance of the Qur'an in the society, the pains that Muslims have taken to preserve it and to pass it on to their children. And of course, the point of all of this is to develop a relationship with Allah through the Qur'an, develop a relationship with the Book of Allah, to understand it by reciting it on a daily basis, to be in touch with the communication from our Creator. And the ultimate purpose of all of that then is to understand what Allah wants from us and to try to live up to what it is that He expects from us. We're imperfect people. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned, Kullu bani Adam khatta. This is an intensive form of the noun. He said, every descendant of Adam, every child of Adam is a khatta, which means a repeated sinner. And he said, وَخَيْرُ الْخَطَّائِينَ التَّوَّابُونَ. The best repetitive sinners are those who turn in repentance. So this repentance process is something that is an ongoing thing also. He didn't say ta'ibun, but tawwabun. So again, this has the sense of repetition. Make mistakes and then turn back. And to the extent that Allah, because this is part of our process of growing, the nature of the test of this life, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if you didn't commit sins and then ask Allah to forgive, Allah would replace you with people who do so. Because part of that whole process is recognizing how deficient we are and how indebted we are, how much we need Allah's mercy and His forgiveness. But if we turn our backs on the Qur'an, then we turn our backs on Allah. So if we read the newspapers and we're watching news and having people's views about what's supposed to be going on in the world, and we're entertaining ourselves with novels and songs and movies, and we never turn to get input from this source, then there's no way that we can be rightly guided. Sometimes you meet people who are kind of in a state of fitra. I remember this brother, I really loved that man. He was an Afghan who had married an American woman. She had been part of that historical situation of the hippie overland route through Europe, across Asia. They used to pass through Afghanistan. They would end up in Nepal, where hashish was readily available. And then they would make their way overland back to Europe and back to the U.S. So it happened that this woman landed in his hotel, and he ended up marrying her. And after the war broke out, when the Russians invaded Afghanistan, they had like 4 children at the time. They came to America. And he couldn't read or write. He used to work 14, 16 hours a day as a vendor on the streets in Washington, D.C. And he didn't have that much knowledge of Islam, but he was on fitra. He couldn't read the Qur'an. I once sat down with him and tried to teach him, you know. We had one session, you know, and after a while he said, you know, I just can't get this. But despite that, he was on fitra. He had that pure, original nature that Allah gives every human being. And he had absorbed Islamic teachings from attending the mosque and hearing scholars talk when he was in Afghanistan. And so he was basically a very good man. So it's possible for a person to be somehow cut off from being able to read the Qur'an and still retaining fitra. However, that Afghan man, I mean, he wasn't busying himself with reading this or that. He couldn't read. And he was too busy making a living in order to be spending lots of time entertaining himself. So all of those other things that people use to put ideas and images and thoughts into their heads, he wasn't doing that. Most people in the world in which we live today are subjecting themselves to a steady stream of this input. And that's the world we live in. I mean, it's not going to stop. If I just do that, I'm going to poison my heart, poison my mind, because some of that stuff is beneficial and some of it's not. So we have to balance that by taking time out on a daily basis to read the Qur'an. And we have to make an ongoing effort also to understand what it means. We've run out of time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wallahu a'lam.
اقرأ أخيا ورتل القرآن اصبح بصوتك اسمع الأكوان اقرأ كلام الله داوي نفوسنا لنحس في أعماقنا